Good morning. On behalf of ArCADiasoft, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. Today we will talk about the 3D view. Last week we talked about the very important part of our program, which is the project manager window. If you haven't seen the previous webinar, of course I encourage you to watch it. Today I'll discuss a slightly less important window, but definitely a more effective one. The 3D view can be of two types, either in simplified mode or in advanced mode. It depends mainly on the graphics card and its power. If the program detects that the card is too weak, it will automatically switch to the simplified mode. The simplified mode will differ from the advanced mode. First, you will have a visible sun, which is defined in a specific location. You can indicate this location on your own in the project properties under this icon right here. Or it is also collected from a geographical location. So, of course, you also have all the shadows from the sun. We can show animations of the sun and the transposition of the shadow and light, for example, across our building on the facade. As you can see, we are dealing here also with the moving elements. In front of the building, there's a group of people talking. In the simplified mode, such animated characters will only be cubes. There's also an animation of grass and water. And, of course, you cannot see it in this project, but it is possible to get these things, and they will be visible then. Now we'll switch to a slightly smaller project, and I will tell you about all the options of this 3D view. First of all, it now switches to that simplified view. That's the 3D icon with two arrows. If, as I mentioned earlier, the graphics card is too weak, the program will automatically leave this view to us here. But when the graphics card is good and has a high spec, it may be that you will want to switch to this view by yourself. It is not as impressive as the advanced view, but in some cases a lot more will be visible in this view than in the other one. I'll show this to you in a moment. Here you have the options available under the 3D view options icon. As for the simplified 3D view, you have here what is in the background. It will either be a solid color or it could be a loaded photo in PNG, BMP or JPEG format. You can take a photo in the location where the object is located, but remember that it will not be stretched onto this frame, and this background will not affect the building. I'll close this window for a moment. If you take a photo in a given location and it looks good because you took the photo in the place where the building stands, just please remember that if you rotate the building, the background photo will not rotate and may not fit this place anymore. So you will have to enter the settings again and replace the photo. So please remember that the photo cannot be rotated. You cannot insert a panoramic photo, only the frame that you want to show on the visualization. We also have a level of element detail here, LOD or LOD as some people call it, in the low level of detail. The trees look more simplified here, like a ball on a trunk or like a cone. There will be other simplified shapes, but you will not be able to see all these leaves and small elements. It will be the same with 3D objects. All other elements will not be modified. The average and high level of detail at this point will not have the significant difference that you will be able to see. I'll switch in a moment and show you the other parameters and settings for this advanced view. But first, in this view, I will discuss the icons that we will have here in this window. You have the option of saving cameras. Here is the predefined list of already defined ones from the very beginning, and this is a place for your cameras. So you can set those that you want to show to someone later, or at least those created to move around our project easier. So after you just click on Add New Camera, and you either create a name or you can modify an already existing camera. And then if you want to switch between them, you do it in this way. Now another setting, note that by default the 3D view is a perspective, which means the standard one for your eye. But you can also turn on axonometry, a layout where you do not have this perspective. But then you can only see the building and this orbit rotation mode, so you can move it around. Zooming is done by moving the mouse wheel, And moving the view is done by pressing the mouse wheel down, and with the wheel still pressed, you move the mouse, and then the whole view moves in the same way as you move the drawing in the projection. For me, the perspective view is a lot clearer, so I'll switch to this perspective. Now, the next two icons are quite important because they are colors. The color scheme is taken from the Project Manager tree, and the second one is taken from the textures, which means that overlay surfaces that have been defined. Here you can see I have wood. I have some tiles in the driveway. I have some colored plaster inserted. So you can see that I have the view turned on with my surface textures. If I switch to this view of the colors, someone could say that it doesn't look too interesting, but it is better so that if, for example, I turn off the architecture and turn off the trees around me and my fence, they take up a bit of space in my project, so this will take a bit of time. Okay, now I'll just turn off the terrain. And here, as you can see, you can now look inside and see what is there. For example, you can see the installations. Look at the plumbing in this view. You can see where the hot water is and where the cold water pipe is. When it comes to heating, here you have a heating pipe, and you know where the water supply is and where the water flows out. If I switch to the textured view now, I switch to the texture view now, and notice that these copper pipes are for heating, but here you have two gray water pipes, and now it is not known which is which. So this view is mainly recommended for people who deal with installations, so you can see everything, and you don't have to wonder what is what. You can switch to this color view from time to time, but remember that this view from the project manager will result in the walls and windows being drawn in white by default. They will be drawn this way. They're not transparent here. They have the colors taken from the project manager window. I have a brown door here, so that the colors here, the windows, are white. So they look opaque because of the white color they have assigned to them. If I change the color scheme now, you can immediately see that it looks different. There's no transparency here. There's only the color that is in the Project Manager window, but only, of course, in the 3D view tree. What you can see on which of the views was spoken about in a previous webinar, so I suggest you check out our channel and watch the previous presentations. Now I will switch to this other project for a moment. And here I have this view only from the colors. And as I mentioned before, you have the ability to rotate your view. This is the orbiting mode. This is how you move around the project, but you have the option of two more viewing modes on the project. This is the flight mode, that is the mode where you give directions, and the keyboard arrows follow that direction. Please note that you are following the cursor here, so if I look up slightly, I go up. If I lower my head a bit, I go down, which may result in the fact that if someone is not too used to, for example, playing games, he may unfortunately fall into another floor or even go underground. So I won't be walking around in this manner. On the other hand, if you choose the walking mode, then you walk at the exact height where you stopped your camera. You'll be walking in the direction you're looking at, but only and exclusively at the one height of the set camera. So with these three icons, you can change the way you move around the 3D view. Remember that these three icons that allow you to move around in the 3D view are here. The other two icons are for lowering and raising the camera, which is also done by holding down the wheel mouse. Two options of the ArCADia architecture module are to do with rendering, but I will talk about them later. You might notice, however, that I also have rendering here, and yes, you're right, because it is this advanced mode, this rendering is done in real time, which means with each frame, and therefore you need a good graphics card to make it possible. Here you have two icons that are used to save the scene. You can save the scene to a file in the JPEG, PNG, or BMP format. However, you can also paste this into, for example, a text message in an email or in some other document that you will later send to someone. Now let's move on to these more advanced settings when it comes to the 3D view, and for this I'll open a slightly smaller project which will run a bit faster. I will turn on this terrain here. Okay, it's just going quickly. And because the shadows from the building is one of the options that you can turn off, and therefore without this option visible, I wouldn't be able to show you everything that I want to. Here too, of course, you can switch the level of detail in the 3D view, just like in any other view, and it works exactly the same way as in this low detail view. However, please note the fact that I have a few projects. In one project, there's an advanced view, and here, a simplified view. So you can switch at any time, of course, if the graphic card will allow it. If the program detects that the card is unfortunately unable to handle this 3D view, it simply won't be possible to turn it on. You will see a red cross in the middle, and the program will inform you that, unfortunately, it is not possible, and then you can think about replacing maybe your graphics card. In these properties, the level of detail is on the right, but here on the left, we have the quality. What does that mean? The quality of the 3D view, the lowest one, it gives you a slightly similar effect to the simplified view. In other words, we turn off the position of the sun, or more generally, the position of the light. It is as if behind us, and therefore, the surfaces are always lit up. There's no light and shade here. There's no shadow from the elements. And when it comes to elements such as grass and trees, they are simplified. When we change this quality to average, the detail of the elements will be more visible. Note that the grass already looks different, but only in the immediate vicinity. The remaining views, depending on the power of your card, can be changed. The higher the level, of course, the card will use more memory, but the better the effect will be on the scene. So will be the visualization of your project. You also have the option of cloud cover here. So whenever you will have clouds showing in the scene or not. And if, for example, in the simplified mode, you had something that you could load a photo there so that you could also take photos from the location where the building is located, here you could be tempted to turn on the Skybox. Now the Skybox is a space that surrounds us. It is a cube in which you will be inside of it. So you must enter the inner surfaces of this cube as elements. Click here and enter the appropriate bitmap, PNG, or JPEG file. Where to get such files? When it comes to the internet, mainly from the so-called online gaming environments, because it is in this type of environment. So mainly it will be, for example, some areas like the Sahara, a forest somewhere in the distance, or just trees or skies with clouds. But you can take a panoramic photo. It would be better, of course, to use such a 360-degree photo, but not many cameras have such a function. However, when you have a panoramic photo, there are such programs on the internet where you can test which one will be the best for you. And the program can take such a skybox from a panoramic photo. So, I will just divide what you can see in front of you. Then, if it is turned 90 degrees to the right, and then 90 degrees again, so now you're looking back, as if you're turning 180 degrees. And again, if you looked, but 90 degrees from the last location. That is again to the side. And here you have the top, here you have the bottom. So you could also assume that you will take 6 photos exactly as described and place them here. It would be better from this panoramic photo because then the frames would be nicer for you. Only in some programs, let me tell you, this picture is a right and left picture. So you may have to swap because sometimes they change places. So remember to check that the right and left pictures are not swapped. And here you also have the sun animation. By default, here it is shown that the day is, and that the default settings, which you can switch to the static position of the sun, in the Calculate Sun Position. Here you can enter the geographical location, what day, what time, and then from time to you'll show this animation. What will this mean? Well, this will mean that here you can show this animation on this project. That is, I let the sun move now, and you can see I can accelerate, slow down, stop. And here, by the way, pay attention, you have the option to save a movie. It is, of course, mainly not to stand in one place and show the chiaroscuro changes on the project, and which are the changes of light and shadow. Although, of course, you can also, but rather from the entire perimeter of the project, when you walk and use the flight mode. You can turn on recording, and then when you move around this 3D view, it will be recorded. At the end, you turn on the recording options again, and then it will be changed to stop, as you can see, this place here. You save it to an MP4 file, so you can create such a movie for the project. I'll show you a portion of this animation. You can also pause it at any time, save the scene, and then come back to the animation again later, including, of course, if it is the time of night. You see the shadows moving there into the nighttime. And for example, you can see the moon passes by. I'll speed it up a bit. And now the animation can be obtained here. And there's one more icon. It is the switch over between these modes, between the simplified and advanced. And the last icon is the transition to the ArCADia Rama program. So the project you have can be converted, and there will be strictly construction objects shown there. And with one icon, we can transfer it to ArCADia Rama. And there, for example, calculate or check the construction, draw something, and send it back to ArCADia Architecture. There's an option to import such a structure back with this F3D icon. As you have probably noticed, when creating such visualizations and when you show any project, the elements that are around it are very important. I mean textures, the so-called surfaces in the program, materials on the walls, what is on individual elements, on the roof, on the ground, and so forth. For example, differentiating various textures and elevations, and of course 3D objects. These things are essential because the design of even such a school, as you see here, will not look very attractive, even if you only have the chiaroscuro here. Therefore, when you design anything, remember that objects can be textured, that is, you can assign materials to them. So when it comes to elements, you can say that the easiest way to do it is to texturize them after selecting them, and in this window that appears, you have the Surfaces button. Here I will change this wall to a shorter one, because the wall is a very characteristic element, which when texturing, when changing the surface, you need to know in which direction the wall was drawn. Please note that when you select the 2D view, this is simply a view where there's an arrow in which direction the wall is drawn. Why is this important? Because, please note, how the right side and the left side surfaces are called. You also have sides. That is, if the walls are not adjacent to one another, then it's an edge, of course. And the edges of the opening are the same surface. So here, they are sides. The left and right sides can be textured in a different way. But please remember that if you select this element on the 3D view and you have the same textures, you may not want to target the surface. You may not be able to target it exactly where you want it, so pay attention to it. Of course, when inserting elements, you also have the option to define objects, because already at insertion, you have access to the properties. And so it is with every element and to the surface of the properties. It is always in the same part. So in Appearance, and here under the button Surfaces. I have here 3 wall sections inserted. The walls are inserted exactly in the same way. I'm showing this purposely on this advanced view, because on the simplified view, this view will be flattened, and there won't be any of this 3D effect. As you can see, the simplified view only shows simple textures. What I want to emphasize here is that ArCADia can also load and edit PBR textures. The textures that consist of several files, the main file, and then files for rounding, so that the surfaces look rougher or with more shine. You can define such things by yourself because you have special libraries for this. I'll stop here for a moment. Please note that this wall has bricks. And now I will show you from which library it was taken. You have a user library here, which will be created when you start creating your own elements. But here you have an HD surfaces and SD surface. HD surfaces have the option that they are three-dimensional. If you use this library, just stop for a moment on the inscription and you will see a preview of a given element. This brick is made of HD surfaces. It is brick 06. The middle one is of a surface also selected from the library, but from these SD surfaces. They are just a photo, so you cannot get their depth in any way. If the light was diffused as seen here in one of the textures, there's no distinct play of lights in any way, unfortunately, but you won't be able to get this effect later on in your project. And the last of these textures is a texture selected from the user's library, and on it I'm showing you what the difference between the surfaces is. We move now to the Manage ribbon and go to the library of surfaces. You have a lot of surfaces in the program, but of course it may happen that you want something other than what's in the program. Those surfaces that are in the program library, as you can see, are not editable. But you can always copy them. You can copy them here and then go to the user library and paste them in there. You can define the size and, for example, the angle of rotation, because it is quite important. Sometimes it may happen that you want, especially when it comes to wood, that it has a different angle. Additionally, here you have these 3D effects. Please note that I'm just changing the surface here with this slider. This is taken from an extra texture. This texture here, which is the roof tile 04, is composed of several files, each with a slightly different name. So this roof 04 is the same, and then there is a different ending. Another ending is loaded to the appropriate part of this window, which gives us the opportunity to modify, for example, in height. Pay attention to what the effect will be now and how this file is modified. Cool, isn't it? Now, if I delete this one bitmap and switch to another view for a moment, it will refresh it immediately, and this tile will be a bit different. Have a look here, please. I won't save the changes as it takes a while. I will show it also here. It will be more visible in this example. I'm going to take this cube lower this map to 0, which is here. This is also the height level. Now please note this cube is absolutely flat. It's a flat cube with nothing protruding outside from it. But if I start to move the slider now, look at the light that is here. It gives this cube a sort of a three-dimensional view. The convexity of these elements, and here you can clearly see it, how it changes. Right? It's giving life to a rock. Well, there you go. You can also emphasize it here with the height. It means the file with shadows of these elements. And this can also be slid. So after modifying such elements, your textures may look completely different. I'm not going to make any of these changes here, as of course, the calculation may take a while to save it. And one more thing, you can choose these textures from the library, but you also have this icon here. as you see, and directly on a given element. You can load any file or from the program, and you can, for example, rotate such a texture here. You can also change its size. You can also decide if it is to be transparent or not. Here I'm doing it on the side, so it will become visible that it will be a little bit different. Just remember, if you have, for example, a file downloaded from the internet, which consists of several of these files, of course, it would be best to load it into the library that I showed you a moment ago. That is on the Manage ribbon, in Libraries, and under the Surfaces icon. You can still define here this level of three-dimensionality of your element. If you preview it here, you will not be able to do any more editing. Remember that in the way these files have been saved, you'll be able to insert them in the same way. If you have a single bitmap, it will look like this. But if you find a more complex texture, it might look more interesting. And it doesn't have to be flat like this. And now when it comes to what is around our project, we're probably somewhere here in this part. Please remember that what is very important, what else we insert in the project, I mean the 3D objects. On the Insert ribbon, you have the Object Explorer tab, and there you can find the standard library. It is not installed by default, so here I encourage you to watch the first webinar where I showed you how to install libraries and at what point. Now let me just mention that you can add a user library to this standard library. Of course, you can also expand it with libraries from the ArCADiasoft collection. However, it may be that you will not find the particular element here, and you can find this on the internet. How can I do this? The best way is to create your own folders in the user library by the Add Folder option, and then click on Import. Such objects, of course, you first have to download from any place on your disk, and then you can import these files to your library where they will be permanently. The formats that you can import are 3ds, OBJ, ACO, and XObjects. And for any of you who are unfamiliar with what XObjects are, these are the libraries of the ArCADia program. Here you can also import DWG objects in a slightly different way. You just need to open such a project and save it here using this icon. How are objects inserted? Objects are very easy to insert. Here we'll choose some external elements. And for example, maybe, what looks interesting? A fountain. I double click on the element. You can also click once and click Insert here. By default, there is a rotation option in this window, but this element is quite symmetrical, so I think rotation will be unnecessary. I'll just go into the settings here and define that this element will be 2.5 meters. By default, as I said in the first webinar, ArCADia works in centimeters, so we're talking about centimeters here. Now just click where you want this object to be placed. I don't know if you have noticed a comment when I started to insert this object in the terrain, so that my object will be placed at the height of the place on the terrain. I switch to the outside terrain in the Project Manager window. If I were to stay on this level, the object will be inserted on this level, which might not reflect what I wanted. So this is what inserting objects looks like, just by clicking. If you wanted to, you can always go back to it, rotate this element, or insert another one. As for animated objects, they are here on the next tab in the Object Explorer Manager window. Let's say that people standing or sitting are inserted by clicking in a given place. However, if we are talking about people who walk or run, please remember that after selecting such a person, you must mark here in this window that you are showing a path. You can draw this path with a polygon. Here I will specifically make a round about this fountain. The height adjusts automatically under the right button. When I leave the option, the object will now move. There are no drawn paths on the view, therefore the element is not visible. It cannot be selected because animated objects are mainly visible on the path. By default, the walking or running speed is 15 kilometers per hour, so it's more like running than walking, but you can always change this later. The Object Explorer also has the option to enter 2D objects. These are mainly elements that will be used to mark certain places with symbols. So, for example, an arrow at the entrance or a sign in the toilets, which one is for disabled people or where there's enough space to turn a wheelchair? All these elements can be found here, and if you do not find what you need, you can create such items using the user library. You can also define layouts here. There are no default layouts that can be created by the user. These layouts can be of various kinds of furniture. For example, you can put together the kitchen desks and the surfaces and cupboards into one section, or tables and chairs with sofas. So with one click, you can insert any of these into the project, which just saves you time, of course. And for the remainder, the Object Explorer can be found in the Insert ribbon. Now a few words about the presentation of our project. If you have a license for the ArCADia Architecture module, you can use the rendering option, and I recommend rendering mainly for interiors. If someone has a weaker card, we can recommend that you use this rendering option. With a better graphics card, just save the 3D view in the advanced view mode. When rendering, you can choose whether it is inside or outside the building. It is important that other settings should be defined. These are renderings from previous versions of ArCADia, not from this one, 14. But please note, for example, the brick of these buildings looks a bit different than on my sample project, where there are only 3 walls. But it is only one texture, so this is not a PBR texture. This is a very interesting texture. I've just downloaded from the internet. As you can see, it is not so flat. It means you can find interesting textures for visualizations there. Now, something very important. For this visualization, for this rendering option, the PBR texture does not load. The same as they are not visible in the simplified 3D view. Therefore, to sum up, the PBR textures are recommended for advanced 3D view only. For rendering and simplified 3D view, the PBR textures might not read in full, or they might not load at all, just like these animated objects. We also have an additional module called ArCADia-3D Maker. If you have purchased a license, you will find it on the collaboration ribbon in the presentation group. There are 3 icons: Create, Save Data to the ArCADia-3D Viewer, and In Cloud option. I will show the saving in the cloud on this smaller project, on these 3 walls. You choose one of the options in the cloud. The program will check if you're logged in. If we are not logged in, the program asks you to choose one from the 3 cloud options available. After selecting one option, the program saves the project. I'll show what happens at the end. A window is shown here where you can either copy and forward the link, or read this code and view the project on your phone or browser. I will show something that we saved earlier, which is a little bit bigger than these 3 walls, and show it to you in the browser. And here, as well, when you're moving, there's a flight, walk, and orbit mode. So remember that you can use these options. There's one more way to save your presentation, and this is to the Create option. And you can save the project with the exe file. I have it open here because it takes a while to open. The exe file cannot be sent by mail. This file is over 30 meg, so the size of the file makes it even more difficult to send by email. But due to the extension, most email programs will simply block it for us. Therefore, in ArCADia, it is possible to save the project for presentations to a 3D file, and then to send such a project, for example, to your investor. You can send such a A3D file. It is a much smaller one than the one shown here. You ask the person that you're sending it to go to our website, which is here, ArCADiaBIMsystem.com, and you can download the free ArCADia-3D Viewer, which is located in the ArCADia tools on the products page on the bottom. There you are. This view will be available to the person who downloaded the free ArCADia-3D Viewer program after receiving the ArCADia 3D Maker file from you. They cannot modify anything here. They can only, for example, make it opaque to see the installations and see the elements inside the building. Of course, to see what the building looks like inside, it is much better to enter it virtually and walk around. However, the recipient cannot introduce any modifications, cannot see the plan or print it. This is a preview of the solid in your project, so that they can see it spatially and walk around it instead of looking at views on a paper. All right, I think the topic has been exhausted for today. Okay, so that was webinar number 3. Let me just switch over to the questions. Okay. Thank you, Sandeep, I think. Can you please enlarge the 3D view window? Okay, it's a bit late for me to do that now, sorry. I don't see the questions when I'm actually doing it. It's on a different window. But I hope that's big enough. It can be enlarged to as large as you want it to be. Okay, is there anything I could tell you guys about? I'll give you a few. Doing some other webinars shortly. We want to start a series on Intersoft and Telecad soon, which will also go through the basics, which I think will be quite useful for all of your guys as well, not only you, but for your clients too. So that we may start that actually from the next one if need be. And we'll maybe give ArCADia a break, but we'll keep you informed. Just subscribe to the channel so you get all the latest information about what is going to be showing. And when you see something that tickles your fancy and is of interest to you, then please log in and we shall endeavor to answer more and more of your questions. Okay, so I think everybody's tired. I'm going to go and have some coffee then. My parched throat is in need. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and we shall see you on the next one. Do take care. Goodbye.